Good evening, everybody. Welcome to tonight's city council meeting. If you please rise and give the pledge of allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call.
Councilmember Wood. Here. Councilmember Conrad Woolman.
Here.
Councilmember Ritchie. Here. Mayor Theros.
Here.
Councilmember Donovan. Councilmember Zerova. Here. Mayor Pro Tem Blue.
All right, do I have a motion to excuse Mayor Pro Tem Galuli and Councilperson Donovan?
I'll make that motion.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Just in case anyone's considering speaking on item 7, it has been adjourned from tonight's meeting. So if anybody's here to talk about the ZBA, we will not be discussing that this evening. Item 3, reading and consideration of the minutes of the regular meeting and closed session held on September 13, 2022. Any questions or changes to those minutes as presented?
No.
I see it. All right, they will be approved as submitted. Item 4, consideration of request to award a contract of liability insurance coverage to Nickel and Saff, Inc. Yeah, I believe that's you.
So the city's been a longtime member of the Michigan Municipal League Liability Insurance Pool since 1984. But we found that their pool provides one significant deficiency, and that's in the area of sewer backup liability. They only provide $100,000 of coverage. So we noticed that a number of our surrounding cities have been getting proposals and changing their carrier to Nickel and Saff and Trident. So we got a proposal from them for at both the $5 million and $10 million level that includes sewer backup liability. So I have John Johnson from Nickel and Saff to answer any questions you may have on their proposal, whatever reviewing it, we recommend over the $10 million liability proposal from Nickel and Saff.
Council, any questions?
Mr. Mayor, I just noticed that another one of those points. With some changes.
Neil?
I did actually a question about, this is probably, you probably already have an easy answer for it, but I noticed in the MML agreement, there was a 60-day notice requirement, which right now would put us slightly outside that 60-day notice requirement with the policy lasting. How do we deal with that? Is there something that carries over?
Okay, so we already put them on notice that we were getting proposals, so they're preparing to that was coming, so we're covering for that.
Okay, great, thanks.
Any other questions?
Louis,
Yes.
I guess I'll just say that I think it's important that council and others know that, prior to this, an email was sent to the Budget and Audit Committee, and we were asked what our opinion was of the coverage limits here and all, and we all came back with the same approval to obtain insurance for $10 million for Trident.
Fantastic. All right, no other questions from council. Anybody in the public have any questions or comments on this agenda item? See none, public comment is closed. I will entertain a motion.
You're on the audit committee, go ahead.
We'll fight over
Paper, rock, scissors, let's go.
it. My motion is to award a contract to Trident Insurance to Nickel and Saff for property and liability insurance for December 7th, 2022 until December 7th, 2023 in the amount of $354,380.
Anybody in support? Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much for coming down.
Great presentation.
Great job.
Great job.
You sold that one.
I hope that was short enough for you, right?
Yeah.
Thanks, sir. And there are business cards up here with my information. If you have any questions, comments, or you need to go through coverages, you can. Thank you. Thanks.
All right, thank you.
Enjoy the night.
Item number 5, consideration of appointments to the Historic District Study Commission. Mr. Baca.
Yes, so the city received a request to consider designating a couple buildings on the Hill Historic, specifically the library and the Punch and Judy building, the whole block between Fisher and McKinley. And so they met with the applicants met with the Historic District Commission and put forward their proposal. They were in favor, so there's a specific process outlined in the ordinance that has to be followed in order to designate something historic with the guidelines set forth by the state. And the first step of that process is to establish a study committee, which would prepare a report on those properties to try and make an evaluation as to whether or not there were historic designation. The applicant, one of the properties at 1 and 21 Kirchhoff, the Punch and Judy side, they have consultants that prepared a report that's included in the agenda tonight. That encompasses most of the information that we're going to need, but the study committee, which would essentially be made up of the Historic District Commission, would need to make some minor changes and put some specific information in there. And then they would submit that to the State Historic Preservation Office, SHPO. And then depending on, obviously then the final decision would be up to the council. We would have to hold a public hearing after we get comments back from the state. So there's a process to be followed, but I think as outlined in the report, they are both pretty significant buildings and are worth at least considered.
All right, any questions from council? No?
Yeah, I guess I had a question. What is the value to the community of having a historic district like this?
For historic buildings, it protects them long-term from demolition, also demolition by neglect is a term that's used in historic preservation where they're required to maintain the property. But also they're eligible for federal tax credits, which I know in the case of at least the Punch and Judy side, they plan to try and take advantage of to redevelop the building. And for a big significant investment, it could be up to 20% of the cost.
Let me just add, part of the process too is if they want to make an alteration to a structure in the historic district, that would then go back to the Historic District Commission for review and recommendation. So it does kind of provide at least some additional level of assurance that you have historic preservation in the structures.
Okay.
So, Shane or Tim, is there no impact on taxable value in this case if it's historic?
If anything, it may help increase their taxable value because of the certain standards they have to keep the buildings up to.
So, my question though is this: Punch and Judy is already multi-stories, facilities are just 1.25 or 1.5 stories. With limit a future owner from adding another story onto the buildings, which I assume.
Not necessarily. I mean, it would limit.
I got a yes from Mr. Burgess.
It will, it will unless the historic commission makes a recommendation that the historic qualities will not be impaired by an improvement. As Shane mentioned a few minutes ago, if you go through the process, the committee makes a recommendation, then the commission makes a recommendation, then the city council approves the designation. One of the consequences is limitation on alteration of those facilities. So, I mean, it's not, you can never say never, but it does create an additional burden.
And we would also have multiple chances to approve that. It's not just like this commission gets out the door and all of a sudden can be doing things without city council.
Right. Okay. That was the point where I was getting at, is that we've got a master plan discussion. And if I recall correctly, one of the things was condos on the hill, condos in the area. And we, by this designation, potentially could be reducing our ability to enact some of the things that might be addressed in the master plan. So I just want everybody to be aware that yes, it has to go through a longer process than just a new owner coming in and saying, multi-story buildings are already allowed, I'd like to do it. It would have to go through the whole historic designation process, approval, et cetera, et cetera. So that's something we'd be limiting, I'm saying, future councils, because I'm not sure anybody's going to be doing this tomorrow, but at least this council or future council be tied to the historic commission recommendation or denial, essentially, on the change of use or change of.
It has to go to the commission.
Correct.
Before he comes to us.
Correct.
So it's another level of staff.
Everybody be aware of that. So, any other questions? Anybody in the audience have any questions on the side? Or comments?
Are we on the
No, wait, we're just on this item, which is the historical designation of these buildings.
Okay,
Okay.
not the 336 Ridgemont, yeah.
Actually, you weren't here. That is adjourned, until probably next month. Sorry, I announced that at the beginning of the meeting.
I know, I'm sorry, I was.
No, it's all right. So yeah, that will not be discussed tonight.
Okay, well then we'll just leave.
All right,
No.
or you can stay, listen, we got
Entertaining.
master plan stuff, we got lots of stuff.
That'll be great.
All right, any other questions from the public? All right, seeing none, discussion is closed. What is the pleasure of council on this item?
No, go ahead.
This is it.
I move the city council approves the attached resolution directing the historical district study committee to prepare a study committee report for 1, 10, and 21 Kirchhoff as outlined in the city code 12-05, section 11.
Okay, support? All right, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, motion carries. Item 6, presentation regarding the master plan from the city's planning consultant, McKenna. Come on up and give us your input.
State Nixon, I'm the and Mayor, Council, I'm excited to be here to discuss the master plan.
Can you turn the volume up a little bit on that? I don't know if you can back and hear it. I can hear it.
I was about to say the same thing. Sir, do you stand a little bit? The microphone? Thanks.
I will also try to project, so hopefully that helps. I will keep the presentation brief. This is the high-level overview. The draft sections are available online for those of you who want to read through the fine details. That's available, but I did not want to bog us down tonight, at least publicly. So, then Derek is master and commander of the slide, so we'll wait for him to push us forward.
Look like just like Russell
So the main objective of tonight's discussion, and hopefully some of the online discussion for those who couldn't be here or want to have some further review of the material, is to go over the goals and objectives that we've drafted based off of the public engagement. You received that summary last meeting, as well as the existing conditions analysis that we've performed. So I'm going to run through the goals and objectives for the 6 sections that we've designated, and then also look at future land use, and then show you how to give your feedback online for those of you who want to engage with that. So you can think about this as kind of an additional public engagement step to validate some of the goals and objectives and the analysis we perform. Thank you. So our first section, and this doesn't necessarily reflect the organizational structure of the plan, is the natural features, which I know is a hot topic in the community, as the next item on the agenda is also looking at some of the facility expansion and separation. So we are aware of the fact that flooding and storm events have become more frequent, and we want to look at how to help prepare the community for further resilience. So these are some of the objectives we set out: adopting zoning language that minimizes the amount of permeable or non-permeable surface, especially around parking development, the potential for a rain garden credit pilot. So we're looking at some of those individual actions and incentivizing that. And then also working with stakeholders and researchers to understand the viability of naturalized shore protection options. I know the city is looking into how to handle the seawall. It was something that came up very frequently in public engagement. So if you want to go to the next slide, we have the second goal for some natural features. The tree canopy was highlighted in the public engagement and both online and during the workshop. Everyone loves the trees. It's a huge characteristic of the community, as you all know. So looking at some, key objectives on how to keep that healthy. I just came back from the conference and learned all about urban tree canopies. I know. So we've got some ideas for that. And like I said, there's more text associated with all of this online. So looking at economic development next, if you can go back, yes. So during the community workshop especially, we heard a lot of feedback about businesses on the hill, how to activate that space. COVID has changed a lot of local business districts, a lot of local commercial areas, thinking about how people are engaging in this now that they a lot more frequently staying at home to work. And how do you foster some more of that community vibrancy through events, streetscaping, activation of public spaces, and then further economic development. As we've heard, people want to focus more on restaurant and entertainment uses and less so on office uses, at least on the first floor along Kirchbold. You can go to the next slide. So again, speaking to that kind of localized economy that shifted in the last 2-3 years, more people starting home-based businesses, gives some more opportunity for mixed-use properties. I know we just mentioned condos on the hill, etc. And then also thinking about how we can activate some programming for small business and encourage some events that speak to some of the people who are staying in the community that would have formerly commuted elsewhere. Go to the next slide, yep. And then speaking to the historic district a little bit as well is ensuring that new developments maintain aesthetic standards of their surroundings. People overwhelmingly want to see the aesthetic character, especially in the downtown, but throughout the community, maintained. So identifying if there are redevelopment sites, and then ensuring that the redevelopment complies with some design standards and introducing some landscaping, and that could all potentially be folded into the historic district if that is something that's decided to be pursued. So the next section, mobility, which there were a lot of very thoughtful, specific comments around sidewalks and crossings and streets. So there's a lot of objectives, but they're all kind of very targeted. As I was really happy to see people on the map, especially online, offer their insights that I would never know, not being here every day. So thinking about how the sidewalk network works, you have a great sidewalk network, but down to the point where there's a rock jutting out in this one section, how do we handle that? It's something that we wanted to incorporate. And then saw a lot of people using bikes to get around, especially this summer, and thinking about how we can incorporate that, as well as it will kind of lead into our next goal on this section as well, further vehicular and pedestrian safety. So some opportunities there, and thinking about kind of what we call complete streets, making sure that it's friendly for pedestrians, bicyclists, and also vehicular traffic. You won't see anything too radical. There's no, I know Lakeshore and the pathway is very controversial, but ultimately nothing that I think you'll find too, just really just enhancing what we have currently. So going to the next slide, talking about the safe and efficient transportation options, like I mentioned, thinking about a dedicated turn lane along MAC. Obviously that would take some MDOT coordination, and we heard a lot about on-street parking, so there's some opportunity there. And then as well, just making sure that the city continues to monitor traffic. Not that that was something that was identified as a huge issue, but we know as time goes on, things change, and it's good to keep a pulse on that. So community facilities, obviously one of the things that makes Grosse Pointe Farms what it is, and we heard a lot about the Pier Park possibilities. Again, very detailed feedback to hangers for your towels near the pool, to wanting more programming throughout the year, and having a few more recreation opportunities in the city. One interesting component is some of the opportunities throughout the neighborhoods to support a small, very limited pocket park is what we call it. So, and then ensuring infrastructure remains supported. We know you're doing a great job with that. You're very active, and as we talk about the sanitary sewer separation, continuing to support initiatives like that. We'll go to the next slide. I think land use is what we've been waiting for. So again, maintaining those design standards, keeping unique traditional look of Grosse Pointe Farms, objectives that help specify any new homes, what they quality of materials and level of detail that must be incorporated. And then also aware of what was going to be a zoning case, the residential garage challenge in a lot of cases, and how the width of some lots limits people to want to go up, etc. So looking at creating a zoning ordinance policy that's responsive to that. The preservation of historic buildings, even potentially outside of that historic district, and looking at tactics around that. And then administrative site plan reviews potentially for new residential construction. That's kind of a best practice. So we want to go to the next slide. So we also heard that there's people who have a changing preference for housing. People want to age in place. During the public workshop, I had many conversations about the possibility of how can we stay in the community, but I don't want to stay in my, large single family home. So looking at where we could potentially support accessory dwelling units, mother-in-law units in the back of residential areas that have lower density, so we're not building up on these higher density lots. And then also incorporating the mixed use, potentially condos in existing commercial corridors, so on the hill, potentially on map. Those are kind of the highlights, and if you go to the next slide, we can take a look at the future land use map. You won't see anything too, nothing changes that much. Some of the changes are the mixed use, providing for kind of a mixed use area on the hill. There's opportunity to kind of right size zoning around Jerry's, and again along Mac we have some opportunities for mixed use, and the map is very small on the slide, so if you can go online and look at it, you can get a little bit more of that detail. So those are the highlights from any kind of changes to the future land use map and what we would be looking at for any of those. And then quickly how you can do these sections and give your feedback. Go to this website, so it's tinyurl.com/GPF-master plan. And this is the page. If you scroll down, you will see each section's been uploaded, so you don't have to scroll through the whole document. If you're only interested in land use, you can just look at land use. And then there's a forum that's associated with each section. So if you have a comment you want to provide about the whole plan, there's a forum for that, but also, again, if you have something that you feel like wasn't incorporated or something you want to bring to our attention about mobility or natural features, you can leave your comments there. And hoping, originally, I know we were potentially looking at this being a week earlier, so we were, if you go to the next slide, I'll give you a quick timeline. I was hoping to get some feedback by next Monday, but if other comments come in a little bit after that, I understand. And then we're going to take that, hopefully validation of our current ideas, and incorporate them into the zoning plan and implementation plan, and send that and package it up so it looks very nice. And then you'll hopefully see that at your November 14th meeting. If you approve distribution, which is the legal requirement through the Michigan Planning Enabling Act, we will start that 63-day comment period that's statutory, and then by February, we'll be looking at adoption. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to take it now. Also happy to hear comments online if you want to look into things further.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. I appreciate your overview with that, being so succinct with it. I also appreciate all the work and facilities, the facilitation that your firm has done. I do have a couple of questions, and I have some different comments. I know that we had one public forum, and that's my point, one public forum. I attended, and I have to tell you, I mean, while we had good turnout, I think it could have been far more comprehensive, given the time for an understanding with all the maps that were distributed, and I know I myself are trying to read through, what is this? So I do think that it's important to have public engagement, and we certainly have offered that, or our city has offered that through the website. But when we're looking at more feedback and an opportunity to have more feedback, I think that's necessary, particularly of timeliness of different issues as well. For example, if you take a look at what one of your recommendations or one of the thoughts would be as far as the Hill and for more people that are working from home, well, yes, during a pandemic, that was true. Now, if you look at the last 3 months, what are we seeing? A bit of a reversal of that. We've seen it today with some different analysis that came from the University of Michigan. We've seen it with an analysis as far as different chamber of conferences that are coming out. We've seen it with some different national studies. We've also seen it in our own locale here in the city of Detroit, where more and more employers are encouraging their workers to go back to work. So that's somewhat fluid, whereas to make an actual decision on that or recommendation, I think it's premature. The second thing I wanted to bring out is that it's all by argument for saying extend the deadline for getting more feedback. The second thing I wanted to bring out, you know, my brother lives on the border of Moran and Chalfont, and I drive by there. Could you define what a pocket park is?
Yes, so this is one of the kind of fun ideas. I at least hope you think it's fun. So there's
He
a
doesn't
very,
right now, but that's okay.
there's a very small, like triangle essentially that's owned by the city right on that corner. I mean, it's very, very small. So when I say a pocket park, I mean, you just create a bench. It's not programmed. There's no awnings or any
No
sort of,
grills.
no grills.
Joy Bells would be an example. Joy Bells at Ross and Brookline Boulevard.
I just look at other different intersections throughout the farms and there's wider space. Or something like that. Moran
Hold on,
and Chalfont
hold on,
is not that
time.
much. It's also a very busy intersection with a lot of school kids, church traffic, a number of things. I just think we need to take another look at that.
Absolutely. Our analysis kind of looked at where city-owned property that would be conducive in terms of ownership would allow that. And then also with the location of the school kids, you know, potentially offering like a midpoint crossing point. And so I think there's potential to look for other locations, and it's by no means a must, and that's why we're here is to hear this feedback. And but that was kind of the thought behind suggesting that potential location.
All right, I have some other different questions and issues now, but I'll defer to the rest of the council people and also knowing that you probably will extend feedback and also just take another look at the website for some different updates. Thank you very much. I appreciate your work.
Thank you.
Yeah, specifically what I would suggest for that, the question about the pocket parks is encourage pocket parks, not necessarily specific ones. I think that it's right that you were looking at, hey, what are the pieces of property that the city actually owns? And that might, because I thought the same thing. I was like, I drive that intersection all the time. I was like, where? It must be a really tiny
It's a
triangle.
bus stop.
It must be like a little tiny triangle. But I think the idea of pocket parks in principle are a good one. And I just kind of tag teaming off of what Beth talked about. I think that an idea of actually having a public engagement session on this plan to actually solicit feedback and do the really concise presentation you just did and kind of bring in some back and forth would be helpful, because I do think a lot of people, you know, you have to be pretty proactive to show up at a public forum, sure, but even more so to like go to a website and give the feedback. So I think like inviting people in, explaining a little bit of how we arrived at what we did would be particularly helpful. One other specific thing that I had in the land use question, I couldn't exactly see it in the map here, but one thing that we've talked specifically about were those M Streets, Mapleton and Muir, and the kind of how we've consistently had to deal with questions of zoning in those areas because those lots are so unusually small. And one thing I would frankly really like to see is, I don't know if it's a special designation for zoning, but some way that helps us deal with that so that we're not having to deal with those questions on a regular basis. Specifically because that is a pretty unique area, I think, in the farms in terms of the size of the lots and the size of the buildings on them, compared to even, you know, right now they look like they're all medium density residential, which means that what's on Macmillan is similar to what's on Muir and Mapleton. And I'm talking specifically between Grosse Pointe Boulevard and Kirchhoff. That's a unique area, and it's a place where, you know, when I think about the 3 years I've been at council, we've just dealt with a lot of zoning questions around there. I'd like to see that dealt with in any sort of final product.
I think ordinance committee can handle that pretty easily.
It doesn't necessarily need to be in this.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we
fair
can
enough.
address, talk about it here, but that's a quick zoning board issue, because we do treat different areas differently. So that's a good suggestion. What, I think?
Yeah, hi, Jane. At the conference, the planning conference last week, I heard this concept, which was pretty neat. It was instead of assigning a developer X number of mandatory parking spaces, in other words, it's a dental office, so therefore you have to mandate like 10 or whatever it is, or by square footage. You take the approach that the marketplace sets the number of spaces. So my question is, would that help reduce the amount of impervious surface, first of all? Yes. certainly.
Absolutely.
Okay, because we're not mandating to them what they have to do. They're telling us we can get by with 8 rather than 10. So could we then say to them, oh, well, then why don't you put in something green there? Do some plantings, that kind of thing, which falls, I think, into the natural features, goals, and objectives. So you've got two things going for you. You're reducing the amount of impervious surface, plus you're adding more green space. We add that to the plan. Is that something that we could have as a discussion item?
Yeah, in the natural feature section, you will find strategies very similar to what you're describing. We haven't gone so far as to eliminate parking minimums here. That's a discussion I would love to have with you and the community. But we do have strategies on how to reduce parking and instead plant natural swale or green type opportunities. So if you can look through that, I think you'll find there's a lot to that. And then we can talk about the minimum parking requirements being eliminated. There's a lot of communities, I think you saw Mount Pleasant did it. So that's definitely, I think, the way of the future.
Thank you.
I just want to actually, just in terms of the timeline, so you listed on the next step slide, what the timelines are. Are there any things that are like requirements in terms of timeline, or this is a much more open process? I think we should have some flexibility.
So let me, yeah, I agree. I'd like to move it a little bit. And frankly, what I'd like to do is, I think at the first session, I think our residents were caught a little bit off guard as to what the format would be. I think the vast majority of them were expecting more of a presentation, either from the council or from Kenna. So what I'm suggesting is, let's forget about this February 13 day and November day. I think we can go back to the community building in the Pier Park. I think we can set up stations based on each of these economic development, residential, et cetera, same way as we did before. Set up those same stations, but after we do a much broader presentation that discusses why we are at each phase, where we are in each phase, and then allow people to go into those groups. I think that's maybe questions in the large setting, and then go to a smaller setting. So if everybody's amenable to that,
Yeah.
I would suggest then that the administration work with McKenna, just find a date that you guys are available, and then they'll check with council and we set up our community.
That's great. I really appreciate it. That would have been my recommendation. This was trying to follow our original schedule, so I think that's very wise.
So we'll be flexible to make it work and to make sure we get all the effort we can get to. So,
And there'll be a snowstorm.
Yeah, that's gonna happen. It's gonna be that night.
a lot of the golf carts going back and forth through the snow. All right, are there any questions from the public on this item? Yes, and
The website,
no, you gotta come up and do the whole thing, sorry. You're a pro, Andy, you know this better.
No, I can't walk away.
Oh, sorry.
I just want to get the website, but you got it off so fast, wait, you know, this information. I couldn't read it there.
That's a good, tiny URL.
It's a tiny URL.
Try to make it tiny to make it easier, but
Yeah.
I don't know if it was counter.
Know your audience.
Well, it's, you'll have to write down less this way. That is the improvement, but it needs to be big.
All right, any other questions from the public? All right,
Thank
thank you
you.
so much, I appreciate it. All right. All right. All right, item 6, I'm sorry, 8, we just said 6, skip 7, 8. Presentation regarding the basis of design for storm sewer system improvements from the city's engineering firm, Hubble Roth and Clark. Come on up, Jesse. So just to introduce this topic to everybody, what HRC will be discussing today is the sewer improvement project we've been looking at for several years. And we're getting closer to the basis of design, so our engineers are going to tell us about potential routing of this project and what will occur over the next couple of years.
But we're not making a decision.
No decisions. This is just a presentation about what their, what the process will be.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Technical difficulties. Thank you for having us here this evening.
We don't have to worry about that when we do this.
It's been a long process. Tonight, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about an introduction or overview of the existing system. BOD is the basis of design, proposed improvements based on the selected alternative, the updated cost estimates, schedule, and the next steps. So with that being said, of course, you all know me, Justin Vandekreek. I'm Vice President Principal at Hubble Roth and Clark. I'm the managing partner for Growth Point Farms. Tonight, you guys have heard me talk a lot about this over the years. And you see the reports, and we've been here many, many times. But I want to introduce you to my partner, Mr. Tom Maxwell, who's going to be actually the partner in charge of this specific project. And I'm going to turn it over to Tom and ask him to try and be brief. And I'll come back up at Q&A.
All right, I'll do my best. Thanks for having me here today. Got about 20 slides. to go through. Questions?
Tom, might need your projector voice just a little bit. So
Okay.
get in the back.
Okay, as Jessica said, we're gonna go over the basis design. That consists of 3 contracts as we see it. Contract 1 is the force main and gravity sewer, and that is the purple line and the figure going out to the lake. Contract 2 is a stormwater pump station. That's on the corner of Chalfont and Ross on city-owned property. And that is that little gold square that you see. And then contract 3 would be the sewer separation of that light yellow area, which we commonly call the northwest and northeast quads. That consists of the residential area on the left, the northwest quad, and the country club of Detroit on the right. It also includes some relief sewers in the southeast quad on Mount Vernon, McMillan, and McKinnon streets. So another thing that came up as a result of this review is contract 4. And contract 4 consists of a raw water supply and pump station that we would do as a result of a memo of understanding. And that allows us to put this force main, and instead of taking it down Ross Street, we'll take it to the Country Club Detroit. So the only thing different here is you can see in the figure up on the right-hand side, you can see the purple line goes to the Country Club, out to the lake, and then in the light blue is the raw water pump station, and a 12-inch water main that will take the raw water up to the Country Club property. So now we'll look at each one of the contracts briefly in a little more detail. You can see on the top of this picture is an aerial map. It's basically a bird's eye view looking down at the golf course, and you can see the red line. That represents the force main and the gravity sewer, and it goes from the corner of Chalfont and Ross on the left portion of the screen. Is a 48-inch force main that goes all the way over to roughly the clubhouse entrance. At that point, we're going to have a transition structure, and that's kind of the high point of the terrain. And then we'll go by gravity out to the lake. delay.
Outside.
Okay, so now this is the pump station slide, contract number 2. That's a 65 million gallon per day pump station. It'll service 310 acres, which represents that northwest and northeast plaza I mentioned. And basically, the storm sewer, the storm water will run off and come down that orange line, which is a 60-inch existing combined sewer that will repurpose for stormwater. In addition, we'll pick up the flows along Maras. You can see in the bottom of the screen, 21-inch and 30-inch storm. All those will combine in that brown box. That's the junction chamber. And from there, the flow will be diverted over to the pump station. And at that point, you'll pump it up into the force main, the backside of the property, into the golf course. That blue rectangle represents a generator. That generator would be used for backup power in case you lost your primary power from DTE.
Let me stop you for a minute. Tell me again, the new pump station, where exactly is that?
Oh, that's on the corner of, I wish I had a pointer.
Yeah.
I don't have a pointer. 5 seconds here. This is Chalfont,
Right,
and here's Maras.
right,
Okay, this is the northeast corner, and that's city-owned property.
right,
Okay, does that put you where you need to be?
right.
Okay.
I don't have a problem with the new junction chamber, but exactly where the new pump station was exactly, okay, it's a larger enlarged thing. Okay, thank you.
Yes, that's the green. The green box is the pump station.
Is the junction chamber buried? There's not much underground.
The junction chamber is a below grade structure. You'd have access at the top to get into it if you make this if needed. Okay, so a little more detail, contract 2, the pump station. What you see here is a section through the front view on the left of the pump station and a cross section through the side of the pump station on the right. Okay, you can see all the equipment is very congested. We've got bar screens, we got pumps. There's 5 of them located in the lower level. They all discharge into a common header, go into the force main and out to the golf course. In the at grade level, you can see those tall rectangles. There's electrical gear and control panels that you control the facility with. In the upper attic, we would typically put in heat and ventilation equipment. So what we propose is a Cape Cod style exterior. And this is just to kind of get you familiar with the setting and where we're going to put it in place. Behind that hedgerow is where the pump station would be located, on that corner.
Tom,
Yeah.
can I interrupt you?
Sure.
Or make a comment? I think it's important that the public and also council knows that this building exterior that you have in your plan right now is just suggested.
Yes.
Architecturally wise. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's gonna look just like this. We can come up with a different design, but it's been your experience, right? I think
Yeah.
you explained to us when we had our meeting, that this fits, and when people look at it from the roadway, it's going to not be as obvious piece of pumping structure, so to speak, as.
You've got an example for us, don't you, Tom?
I do, but I just want to point out, the one thing you'll notice about this, and we've got it in Cape Cod, but you can see you walk up to that front porch, if you will, and then you walk down, because the thing that we need is a lot of clearance in that upper level so that we can pull those pumps out to the floor. You can't do it with an 8-foot ceiling. You need like 13, 14 foot of clearance. So that's the reason, the way we've got it situated. It had to be a colonial or a Cape Cod, something of that nature.
I mean, my wife looked past my packet, it's like, "Oh, that's a beautiful house, when are we gonna do that?"
She wants to move in.
She was like, I was like, you can't move into the pump house.
Okay, so the only reason that I'm showing these is just to kind of show you the environment and the setting of where the pump station is going to be. If you look in the upper right hand corner, you can see the green square, the PS, that's the pump station site. The pictures here are on each side of Chalfont, just north of the pump station. And here we've got some pictures of the local homes just to the east of the pump station off of Ross. Okay, so this is the house that you're like.
Yeah.
So, and I found this on Google, and this is exactly what I envisioned for that pump station exterior. But we can work with the city, pick different colors, different types of siding, work with the city and appropriate stakeholders.
Looks like the house down in Shelburne that's just about to be complete.
So now moving on to contract 3, essentially this is the sewer separation. This is what's gonna get the flow, the stormwater down to the pump station. And that's by putting in storm sewers in that yellow area. They're gonna range in size of approximately 12 to 36 inches in diameter. They'll be put in the road right away. And that's the northwest and northeast quads. In the lower area, the southeast quad, we're gonna put in release sewers on Mount Vernon, McMillan, and McKinley. Okay, so the benefits of the separation include significantly reducing the possibility of basement flooding in that northwest and northeast quad. We're gonna reduce the flow of the stormwater to the Kirby Road sanitary sewer by 31%. This is gonna free up capacity for the southern area of the city, because you're getting all that stormwater out. So now you can utilize that capacity in the pump station and the sewers for the southern areas.
So the benefit is throughout the entire inland district, not just that portion separate.
Exactly, good point. And then in addition, you're gonna benefit your neighbors in the regional collection system. Okay, sorry for the delay here. Contract 4, this is what we're gonna build as a part of that memo of understanding with Country Club Detroit. And this is what's gonna get that raw water up to the country club. In the center of the picture, you can see the housing for the pump station. It's pretty plain. So we would envision putting a lot of landscaping around that or masonry wall. It depends on what the city would prefer. It's gonna be located on the water treatment plant site. You can see the orange arrow. Hopefully you can pick that out. And that's where it would be located, just south of Ross and west of Lake Shore. Is that good? You found? Okay. And then over on the right-hand side, you kind of see a map view, and the little blue dot is the raw water pump station, and the heavy line is the 12-inch water main that's going to take the raw water up to Country Club Detroit. So here's the project cost, and this is the project cost. So just let's define that real quick. That's all encompassing, right? That's design and construction, legal fees, administrative fees, etc., to get the job done. And that's for all 4 contracts here. You can see contract 1 is approximately $10.2 million. That's the force main and gravity sewer. Contract 2 pump station is approximately $17.1 million. Contract 3 sewer separation at $12.2 million. And then contract 4, which is the raw water supply, at $2.2 million. So the total project cost is $41,712,000. So now I want to call your attention, hopefully you can see that. I blocked out or bracketed contracts 1, 2, and 3. And I did that to look at funding. Contract 4 wouldn't be eligible under the SRF program. So we're just going to look at the contracts 1 through 3. It's $39,465,000 project cost to do those 3 projects. So this is a busy slide, so bear with me here. Go ahead.
Yeah, I thought we were gonna skip all those things. We're not sure where we're going yet, but I want to keep it brief, because we're not quite sure where we're headed. Go ahead.
I think that, you know what SRF is, and I do, and others, but I don't think that majority of the folks should do, so.
Explain that.
People should understand that there are 2 ways that we could fund this in the future, one through this program called SRF. So maybe you could go ahead and explain what the revolving fund is and what that means to us.
Sure. As Councilman Wood stated, there's a couple approaches here. There's the SRF, it's a state revolving fund loan program. That's administered by the Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy. It's a low interest loan program that's been in existence for about 30 years. You can see in that purple shaded area that the existing interest rate is 1.875% for a 20-year note versus what the city could do out on the market at 4%. So if you look at the savings based on interest rates, it's pretty significant at $3.8 million if you do that, okay? And that's really the purpose behind this. The only other thing that I wanted to say is that the city is going to also pursue a hazardous mitigation grant through FEMA, and that's for the design of all of these projects, 1 through 3. That FEMA grant will give you 75%, that covers 75% of the design fee, and the city's got to cover the other 25%. Does that answer your question, tonight? Okay. And the only difference here is if the city decided to go with a 30-year loan, the savings increases substantially, anywhere from about $4.1 to $9.4 million. If you went with SRF. Now, the one thing that I want to tell you, again, this is only for contracts 1 through 3. Contract 4, you have to go out and bond or use existing city funds to pay for it. Right? It's the raw water supply and the water main under their country code. Okay. The only thing to be aware is that there's a lot of competition for that SRF loan. There's more competition than there are funds available. So while I think we've got a decent chance, it's not a guarantee that you're going to get that loan. Okay, so that's something to be aware of. Same with that grant. I think we've got a decent chance, but I'm not sure that we're going to obtain it.
What's the difference, sorry, again, between funding option 1 and funding option 2, I know the 30 years.
Oh, yeah, okay, sorry, Mayor. Let me go back.
I know you don't want to get into.
Well, no, since we're just doing basis of design and we're going to discuss.
Yeah, I kind of just, I just want to make sure I fully understand this when somebody, and everybody asks me a question.
The difference between the options 1 and 2. The option 1 table is the existing interest rate today under SRF. Option 2, because we're going to apply for it next year, we assume that the interest rate is going to go up.
Gotcha.
With all the interest rate hikes that we've been seeing, we put that up to the highest the interest rate's ever been in the program's history of 30 years, 2.5%, and you're still potentially going to save about $500,000.
Got it.
Okay, we're getting close. This right here is kind of a baseline schedule, and it's a schedule if the city proceeds without SRF funding. You can see on the left are the tasks for the contracts and the funding, and then on the top you can see starting out in year 2022 going across to 2026. So roughly we're talking about a 5-year overall program. Jennifer's got a lot of arrows and clicks in here. So all of these 4 contracts have got design, bid award, and construction timelines. But contract 1 has also got pre-purchase of materials. As I mentioned, we want to do the construction of contract 1 in the golf course over the winter season. We don't want to impact the golf course, right? And so in order to make certain that we do that, we want to have those materials on hand when the contractor is ready to go. And right now, as you know, there's been a lot of delays in materials, obtaining materials. So typically, we wouldn't do this, but under the circumstances and the fixed date that we're trying to attain, basically we want to do that upfront. Okay, so that's something unique. That's the only reason I bring it up. The only other thing too is we want to do a QBS or a quality-based selection for the contractor, because we don't want anybody with an excavator to go out and do the work in the golf course. That's could be a real headache for the city and the golf course and everybody involved. So we want to go through and vet out with the qualified contractors. And here you can see we want to start construction in November, and we want to complete that construction in May. And overall, we're talking about a 3-year program from start to finish.
Just even waiting for the SRF could take a year. Excuse me, waiting for the SRF, yes or no, by itself could take 9 to 12 months, is that right?
Well, we would submit a plan, yeah, I think it's the June 1st or May 1st. And then we get on the project priority list, and then we would basically be potentially awarded in Q4. I've got that shown on the next slide. But it does basically delay the timing to get the loan or get the money, but it doesn't really impact the overall schedule. I'll show you on the next slide. The only thing else to mention here in that red rectangle on the bottom, as contract 4, there's no, there's nothing that requires it to be built now or later. You can proceed with that at any time. So I know this is a busy slide, but the schedule that you see on the top is what we just reviewed. Okay, the schedule on the bottom would be funding with SRF, and that's what the mayor brought up. Basically, that red rectangular area is boxed out, the additional requirements that SRF is required. But overall, it doesn't impact the schedule much to speak of. It's still a 3-year program. And we've done this since day one. We're the first one to submit a project plan 30 years ago. So we've dealt with these deadlines. We know we can do it, and, but they are rigid. There's no flexibility in these dates. Have to be committed to. Okay, so next steps. The first thing that we need to do is, if we're going to go after SRF, is to apply for a notice of intent for an SRF low interest loan. It's a 1-page document. It's very simple, but you have to do it by November 1st. So we need to commit to that. Item number 2 is in parallel, I guess we need to go out on a notice of intent to sell bonds in case you don't get the SRF loan, and that would be in the neighborhood of about $45 billion. This is a 5-year program, so we thought we should probably add 10% for that duration and inflation, et cetera. Item number 3 is required because you're going to go after this loan, you're going to have to go after that grant. There's federal funds involved. So because of that, you had to go out for a quality-based selection for engineering services. And you have to do that for the SRF project plan, you have to do that for design, you have to do that for construction engineering. And as a result, you got to do that really quick in order not to impact those deadlines that I showed you. So with that, I'll turn it over to any questions you might have. That's a lot, I know.
Let's just start with left. Any questions? You sat through the presentation before, though.
Oh, boy. I don't know. This is a monster project, huh? You know, I think you guys have done a nice job explaining what we've got to look at here. I'd love it if we could compress the time frame of construction just a bit, but I think you've you know, got a pretty good schedule here. I'm concerned about the costs. You know, concerned about the cost. I'm concerned about the overall cost. I'm concerned about the cost to the residents. And I'm afraid that you know, you're right. We may not get SRF funding because of our the features of the nature of our community versus all the others in the state. So we're fighting against all these other folks for some limited money. But as far as the basis of design is concerned, I approve it. I think what you've done is rational. It's reasonable. We've got a memo of understanding from Country Club with us that's firm and in writing, and I think it's what we've got is an acceptable approach to hopefully reducing the insult of some of the flooding for our residents. So you know, I approve what you talked about tonight.
I thought it was a fine presentation. I thank you very much. I'm concerned about the timing. I'm concerned I'm not making these timelines, most of all. And I realized it was a huge amount of money, but I think that we probably could be good candidates for the loan programs in that we have history. These are not multi-million-dollar homes that were flooded, not once, not twice, 3 times, but they are mid-sized homes. We're talking about the 3 M's on the streets and some other different streets with it, and damaged property with it. So I think that we actually do have a pretty good case to be made. It's a matter of just timing with it. This takes an enormous amount of courage to do, I realize, for us to make some of these different decisions, but I'm all in favor of it.
No, I think it needs to be done, and I think you go with the idea you're not gonna get the funding, and if you do, you do. And it's gonna last us for 100 years, and it needs to be done. So I'm all in favor for it.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't think there's any question that it needs to be done, so we've got to make a decision for the long run, thinking about this as a 100-year plan, rather than just the one that we're paying is an important part of this. The only question I have is, how is this going to impact the residents' taxes?
I don't know yet until we figure it out.
That's exactly, and then that's the first question that anybody pops up is how does this impact me? And the important thing is I'm confident this council, especially the committee that's looking at this most closely, is going to be very focused on trying to keep that burden as minimal as possible. So I think our goal is to think big and deliver big for the residents, because there is an expectation that we're going to deal with this flooding issue and figure out how to fund it in a responsible way. And I know we're all doing that. So.
And I'll tell you, the audit and budget committee, we spent a lot of time looking at the whole of what our residents paid, not just this one project, timing of other bonds coming off, when this one will go on, et cetera, whole length of term of bond, et cetera. Is this much for 3 years of that? So we will look at all of this. All right, any questions from the public on this presentation? Andy?
Can I see details? I can see the presentation. I can only catch half of this while listening to seeing it. So.
Yeah, it is online now.
It's online with the agenda, so it's part of the packet from today's meeting. So this entire PowerPoint is on the website for you to review.
Okay, good.
Or do you want to print out copies?
We'll give you a copy too. Okay. Started. Come on up, give us name and address. Andy's got a brass plaque on the podium, so we know his name and address.
Good evening, I'm Mr. Regan from 81 Moran. This is my first exposure to the deep dive on this project. Just a question, 2 questions actually. One, are there any federal or state or how many funds available for this?
I think there's a couple of areas. We already have an application right now for funding for the engineering portion of the project. So that's something that we made an application for and are waiting to hear from. The SRF is a state program, a state revolving fund. And it's not a grant, but by providing a loan at significantly lower interest rates than you would get typically on the bond market, there's substantial savings for the overall cost. And that's something that we intend to pursue.
There's also rumor of a potential federal low interest loan program as well, so we keep our eyes on all of that.
And my second question, the audio isn't really that clear. There was some mention during the presentation about the pipe running by the front door of the clubhouse. I was wondering if you could.
It crosses over the main driveway that goes to the clubhouse, but it's actually ends up, the chamber would end up in the parking lot to the right of the front gate. So it's not gonna be up at the clubhouse, it'll be running across the driveway to the front of the clubhouse. And then the hatch would be in the parking.
But during construction, there'd be no access to.
No, it'd be a directional bore, I think, underneath it. You might have to go around, because it's only about a 10-foot junction there, so it'll be a quick jump.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Anybody else? Come on up, name and address, please.
Hello, my name is Greg Campbell, 324 Ridge Road. And I was just wondering, in the worst case scenario, how much of that $45 million would the residents of the city?
$45 million. That's the worst case scenario. That's why we're trying to look at financing with Just to be blunt, yes.
Okay.
I think that the original sewer separation back in 99 cost about 21 or 22 million, so we're here, 25 years later and double.
Thank you.
Thanks. Anybody else? All right, thanks, gentlemen. There'll be more discussions on this, I'm sure. Appreciate it. All right, item 9, consent agenda. Does anybody want anything withdrawn from the consent agenda for individual consideration? Not hearing any. Someone want to move approval of the consent agenda?
I will move approval, Mr. Mayor, with special kudos to the.
All right, all right.
Second.
All right, all in support, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Reports, you have the public safety report. I guess some of it, in September, so I guess we have some more coming in November. Other business, Mr. Reside.
I have no other business.
Any other business? I'd like to thank Sergeant Dion, was at the flag retirement ceremony today. I appreciate you. I could not make it, but the Daughters of American Revolution does a flag retirement ceremony every year. And we have tens and tens and tens of flags retired, and it's a great service. I know we have a box here at City Hall, and it's a great event with one of our Boy Scout troops to retire our American flags properly. So thank you, Tom, for going. I appreciate it. Anybody else on council have anything?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
Joe, go first.
Just want to mention that our traffic citations are double this year versus last year, so the speeding ticket, the message is getting out there, and we want to keep that going. Thank you, guys.
Be careful on Ross Road.
Yeah,
That's right.
I just wanted to thank the great team at the Parks and Rec Department for a very fun fall festival that we had this past weekend. It was a lot of fun. It was had by all and plenty of donuts. And also just wanted to make sure that the rest of the council is aware that we got a new resolution that'll be coming hopefully next month on doing a video stream of future services. So it's been a big project of Beth and mine and the communications committee. So we should be looking at it next month.
All right, Mr. Thiel has stood up first, so I guess he wants to go first. So come on up and give us your name and address, please.
Good evening, my name is Stephen Field. I live at 474 Calvin Road.
Sorry, Lieutenant, yeah, he told me to
Sorry,
sorry.
sir.
I had the right.
I apologize.
All right, sorry.
I live at 474 Calvin, Grosse Pointe Farms, Michigan. And I am here, it's regarding other business, but also in relation to the Public Safety Commission, consideration of Mr. Jensen's appointment. I don't know if I don't think he's a public employee now, so I'm not sure if that exit is, or that authorized personnel area is done with everyone, or if he should still be going back there, but I just wanted to voice that concern. On February 23rd of this year, my birthday, my house was raided by the Sterling Heights Police. And after reading the affidavit and based upon what occurred during the search, it is clear that somehow Mr. Jensen is involved in passing information that is false to either the DEA or Sterling Heights Police. I don't know why they're raiding houses in Grosse Pointe Farms.
My understanding is your landlord had that house address as his house address.
Well,
So they thought your landlord might be there.
Yes,
That was my understanding from public reports.
So yeah, I'll explain it to you. The DT bill was not in his name, which was left out of the affidavit. Also, the water bill was not in his name. And also they left out that they contacted Grosse Pointe Farms Public Safety, who made some kind of indication that it would be likely to produce narcotics if they raided my house. So my daughter, who's 9 years old, almost was there with me. Fortunately, we're out of town. But you know, that likely would have resulted in some kind of bodily injury because they're just ramming the door down, totally convinced of something that's completely false. And you know, I thought it was a gesture of good faith that the last time I was here, I didn't speak. There was a change at the guard, and I thought, well, maybe this is the end of it, or at least I hoped it was. But it was the complete opposite of that. So I think that a first step would be not pointing Mr. Jensen to anything. And then also keeping him out of authorized personnel areas unless he is actually authorized. That's just kind of further gives credence to my claim that there's some kind of two-tier system here in the Grosse Pointes, and it's concerning. Another issue that I'm trying to fully wrap my head around here is for the last several decades, the Grosse Pointe Farms Police have been acting as court officers for the Grosse Pointe Farms Municipal Court. Now, I know that part of that is a issue for the courts, which I'm addressing with scale, and they have already responded reasonably so far. That's no longer occurring, our court officers, but I don't know how, with so many attorneys on the city council and the city attorney, I don't know how that went unnoticed for so many years, that ex parte communications were occurring on a daily basis with the police officers interacting with the judge and running errands, running cases and discussions in chambers that they shouldn't have been privy to. And I just don't know how nobody noticed that. And so basically, there's just a giant cloud over the last several decades of the Grosse Pointe Farms officers' involvement with the courts. And I'm really curious, who was paying for that all along? Was that the Grosse Pointe Farms taxpayers that were paying the Grosse Pointe Farms police officers to act as court officers? So it's just food for thought. But I really feel like there's a two-tier system here. For example, we had a PPO issued by the Third Circuit Court against Mr. Jensen's son. There was a motion to terminate, and it was denied. Our PPO was upheld because he was accosting my wife in front of his police department. And then several officers come outside and absolutely refused to enforce that PPO. I have the whole thing on recording. As you know, I emailed it to you and Mr. Burgess, Mr. Thero. So I'm really trying to maintain decorum here, but it's getting difficult because my life is in jeopardy, and it's obvious it is. Knocking my door down based upon lies and searching my home in only a place that someone I used to be married to would know about is part of the proof we have that he was involved. And I'm texting with the DEA right now as I sat here, and Mayor Mike from Sterling Heights, and they're helping me get to the bottom of it. And I would appreciate it if you guys would help me get to the bottom of it also. Further, after the first, I was excited to hear there was a public safety open house, the first one ever in Grosse Pointe Farms. What I found curious was the condition of the barracks for the police officers, or the fire, public safety officers for fighting fires. There's asbestos, a hole the size of, I don't know, 8 square feet, with just asbestos painted plaster leaking into the barracks. It's been decades since anyone's addressed that. I just don't know how, Matt Baca is writing me over all kinds of minutia, and you guys are just exposing all the officers to asbestos. Not you guys, but the police department is. But I'm bringing it to your attention. Also, one of the reasons I was excited because I've been a resident of your jail. I'm still working on that also. After I was arrested at Picture Day for Little League, so falsely. So I took a sample of water, which I didn't think I'd ever get a chance to do that. So I took the opportunity and I recorded the entire inside of the secure area while with Mr. Hutchins' approval, which to me seems just a further testament that there's something wrong going on here. You can't let people in recording secure areas of the entire police station. And those are the significant issues. I'm just trying to bring a lot of this to your attention because I'm hoping that you'll act on something. I was excited to hear about the new master plan. Grosse Pointe Farms is the only municipality I know that does not require roof permits. And Matt Baca brought that to my attention. Thank you, Matt. But I think it's about time we do something about that because I had some issues with roofing at my neighbor's house. So, I'm just trying to prevent myself from getting killed here because it's going to happen and someone's going to get hurt. It's gone to such a wild extreme. And you guys all know there's something going on. I mean, with this much occurring, it's not, It can't all be just completely made up. I've got reams of documents. Mr. Jensen's pulling sober before he retired, and he doesn't pull people over. And then to pull me over with an active PPO against his son is awfully suspicious. So I would ask that there be some kind of inquiry, just like Sterling Heights and the DEA are participating in, and not appointing Mr. Jensen to anything, and then also keeping him out of the unauthorized area, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else in the public have comment today?
Before I begin, I would just like to give a smile to the Hoboken and Clark guys, because when you talked about the state revolving fund, I was the one of 3 people that developed that concept when I worked for the Office of Water at US EPA in Washington, DC. So to think I would hear this in my own community really gave my heart some thumping, so I appreciate that. All right, you know that I'm Dr. Connie Boris. You know, I'm the Executive Director for Wayne County Conservation District. And I should probably say, unfortunately, I am a neighbor of the Grosse Pointe War Memorial. You know, I gave you 2 statements on August 8th and September 13th. Never got a response to any of my numerous questions. Went back and I looked at the August 10th, 2020 motion. I want to keep putting this before you because there are now 2 violations, not just 1, but 2 violations. The first one, approval of this site plan is subject to the following conditions: to confirm that the proposed lighting in the parking area does not impose glare or other intrusion upon nearby properties. We have been suffering in our south bedroom from the extraordinarily bright lights in the parking lot. Furthermore, the lights on the addition are on day and night. And that parking lot lights are on day and night. It looks like that building with the parking lot, the addition with the parking lot, looks like it belongs in a Las Vegas strip center. It is so bright. So you need to get them to put in amber, soft amber lights. Then the lights go out at 9 or 10 o'clock. I don't want that intruding in our bedroom. So that's one key thing. The second key thing is the second key violation, I should say, is the bird collision reduction glass will be used on all 4 sides of the new addition. Well, like I said, never got any proof despite my request to do that. These lights in both the addition and the parking lot act as a magnet for migratory birds. Cornell University has a department or a laboratory of ornithology. The first week of October, we had like almost 75,000 birds cross through. They start generally about 7 or 8 o'clock at night, and they migrate all the way through to 6 a.m. Just because we don't see them at night doesn't mean they're not migrating. They are migrating. You say, okay, well, what kind of birds are there? Ruby crowned kinglet, American red stark, magnolia warbler, golden crowned kinglet, hermit thrush, bay-breasted warbler, Caspian tern, black-balled warbler, Swainson thrush, eastern wood peewee, black-throated green warbler, yellow-bellied sapsucker, northern parula, rose-breasted grosbeck. We've got a ton of these birds going through, and we've got a magnet to attract to kill them. This is wrong. We need a permanent solution. We need that city council motion that was passed to be implemented.
Did you get a chance to read Mr. Burgess's letter?
I can't hear you.
Did you get a chance to read Mr. Burgess's letter to you that he emailed to you earlier today?
Sent you a letter earlier.
No,
today.
my computer has been dead since Saturday.
So that letter addresses, I think, a lot of what you're asking about when we reviewed the audio tape of the actual hearings. And they did mention a film, and so I think his letter sets forth a lot of the explanation about how they ended up where they are today. And we'll let you continue speaking, but I recommend going back and reading that tonight. Or
I
trying to get over
can't
it.
because my computer is dead. I took it in to the place to get it fixed, so I
We can have a copy of it to you.
Okay, well, if you give me a copy, I'll be glad to read it. But one other thing I want you to be aware of is that EPA is going to designate that polyethylene film as a hazardous substance, and it's going to be done in November.
Because I just read that the Atlanta Audubon Society used that same film in buildings in Atlanta to stop birds crashing into windows. in
Well, they're going to
Atlanta.
be in trouble. I'm sorry, they're going to be in trouble.
Please send us that from the EPA, because I asked,
November, it's coming out in November.
I asked the War Memorial to ask the group that's putting that on there, and they said there are not PFAs in this film. So I'm curious to see
All
what,
right.
I'm curious to see what the EPA says about this
What?
particular manufactured film, not just in general, but this brand that they're using to see if they're designated. So I'd be glad to look at it. We all.
Okay, let me ask
we
you
all-
this. How long does it last?
I understand, we're looking at all that, and they would be required to replace it if it went down. But right now, continue speaking, but I wish you had read Mr. Burgess's letter, but. go
Okay,
ahead.
let me say one other thing. I talked to a fellow from Monsanto in Trenton, and they produce the film that goes inside layers of glass. If it's in between the layers of glass, it's fine. But he himself has said, when you put on this film on the exterior window, it will not last. He said it will disintegrate. And when you do that, you are contaminating the soil. You are contaminating the groundwater and the surface water. I said that before.
You specifically mentioned PFAs, and that's why I asked the question about PFAs. So they said this product does not have PFAs in it. So if you have something that comes out in November, we'd love to see it.
Okay, we'll did it.
All right, thank you. All right, anybody else? Dan, you want to say something? You can raise your hand. You can.
I'm going in there. Good evening. Dan Jensen, 336 Kirby Road. For several years, I've had to sit here and listen to that diatribe without saying anything because I was an employee, no longer an employee. I really don't want to say a whole lot other than his baseless accusations have been proven in court. The charge, the accusation he's made against me about making a traffic stop, and I've made many traffic stops when I was a chief, deputy chief. The one I made against him was a public court. He was found guilty of the violation. No big deal. He's got 3 or 4 pending violations against my son. I don't want to hear any more of that crap. So when I sit back there, it's really hard for me not to say this is all BS, but I appreciate the council and their concern on it, and I appreciate my fellow officers that have to put up with it now. And I really appreciate the council because, you know, it's we put up with this stuff for a long time. And as you know, it's just crazy, but all of it's still in court. There's nothing really to say or do. As far as authorized personnel, I've never been deemed unauthorized to step outside the door. So I don't know what else to tell you, but I appreciate your guys' support, and I'm sorry about all this, this junk. I'm afraid it might go on and on and on. I'd like to handle it in a different manner, but you know what? I respect you guys. I thank you for putting up with the junk that comes with it. I really do. So thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Anybody else in the public? All right, seeing none, meeting's adjourned. Thank you, everybody.